Swords are kind of weird. The more you learn about them, the more you find that almost every question has to be answered with a big fat "it depends." And of course, hindsight is 2020. Not the year 2020, that was about as unexpected as it gets, but sometimes you look back at something and you're like, or maybe even, In hindsight, I was going too easy on this sword in my review. Maybe in retrospect, I should downgrade it. I mean, it's all a matter of perspective, right? How do you even evaluate something? Do you focus more on what quality it offers, what flaws it has, and all of that? Or do you focus more on how it stacks up relative to the price? I was being fairly lenient because this is a fairly cheap reproduction. However, this one right here costs only $170 more. So less than 200 difference between these. And I can tell you that this one is dramatically better. This video is sponsored by good old Thorum, where you find handcrafted rings made of ironwood, dinosaur bone, meteorite, titanium, tungsten carbide, World War II rifle stocks, and other cool materials. In my experience, the craftsmanship on these is excellent, and they're supported by a lifetime warranty. Very comfortable to wear too, especially when you've used the sizer to figure out exactly what you need. Thorum now also offers minimalist watches, which are mechanical design, so no batteries needed. And I hear there may be more new products in the future too. It's a small business founded by Caleb and Steph Martin in 2012, and I always prefer to support something like that over the big corpos. Anyway, check it out, link down below. This sword is from a company called Swordbuy. It's kind of as if McDonald's was called Junk Food Buy. And this is from LK Chen. Now this one is a kilij and this is a shamshir. So technically it's not apples to apples, it's more like apples to pears. As always, there's enough variation amongst these that there's some overlap. In this case, it's fairly easy to tell the difference because the shamshir is more strongly curved and not as broad as the kilij. And the last quarter of the kilij doesn't taper much and has a characteristic shape. But the hilt shape is very similar, especially when you compare historical originals. So what makes this $170 difference so significant? A number of things. One, the finish. So on the cheaper sword, you have this kind of tacky looking mirror polished brass. And on the more expensive one, it's steel and you've got decorations that are on the original. This is a little bit easier to evaluate because I know exactly which original this is based on. It's a shamshir in the Metropolitan Museum in New York City, which I really want to visit if I had a travel budget. The overall shape and decorations are quite accurate to the original. This one, I don't know what specific find it's based on, but I can only guess that they took some liberties with it. Now, when it comes to fit and finish, the interesting thing is that you can't really expect the kind of quality standards that we want nowadays from historical originals. In fact, this here is actually more tightly fitted than the original. You can see that there are some gaps. Another difference is sharpness. This one here is sharp. There's nothing really wrong with it, but this is scary. Now, there is a difference in the blade grind. This one here is, I would say, a sturdier grind because it doesn't taper all the way from the spine. It tapers basically from here. You see it in the middle, there is a fuller, a pretty wide fuller, and then that's where you get the primary edge grind. This one doesn't mess around. It tapers all the way from the spine to the edge. And of course, you're going to see a full review as soon as I've had a chance to test it. I can already tell that this is going to cut extremely well, just looking at it. There are also some subtle differences like the grip shape, which is not that immediately apparent when looking at them, but the grip on the kilij is a little slippery compared to the grip on the shamshir. But here's what really sets them apart: handling. I've already talked about the enormous difference that distal taper can make in another video, link down below if you haven't seen that. And that very much applies here too. So you can see distal taper, no distal taper. Also, the weight is different. Now, this is where it gets tricky. When you want to answer the question, how much does a historical kilij weigh? That's a big fat it depends, because the weights I've seen vary between 500 and 1,500 grams.
Wrong. What I had in mind there was actually the combined weight of both sword and scabbard. Occasionally you see a weight just over a kilogram, but usually they're well under.
This one weighs 1.1 kilograms, which is more than most of the ones I've seen. The LK Chin Shamshir actually weighs 156 grams or 5.5 ounces less than the original. So the observations I'm going to make about this sword are going to have to be tempered by the knowledge that it is somewhat lighter than it's supposed to be. Not a whole lot, but 150 something grams. For a sword, more or less, can make a difference for the handling. The difference between these two, however, is almost 400 grams, which is pretty significant. The length is very comparable, as you can see. It's just that the kilij is wider than the shamshir. So in this case, the distal taper doesn't make as much of a difference because it's just not that strong. You can see that it's a little bit thicker near the hilt than this and becomes thinner, but this is just kind of the average and it's not a dramatic difference. But in hand, it is. Now, the kilij by itself doesn't feel bad, which is why I didn't really complain about the handling at the time. But now that I have this in hand, I can tell you that if I had to fight a duel or even just spar with the blunted versions of these, I would pick this any day over the heavier kilij, because this would allow me to respond much more quickly and I could fight for longer without getting tired. Conveying an impression of handling on camera is tricky, but I'll try. First, some wrist-powered Molonaise. It's really slippery. Much easier. Now, parry, riposte. Guard, cut, guard. Guard, parry, undercut, guard. Okay, that's surprisingly hard with this. Much easier. There's also something about the overall impression, both appearance and feel, that distinguishes these two. Even if this one was the same weight and technically handled the same as it, I don't think it would. Even if it was the same weight, I think you would still be able to tell a difference just because of the grip shape and the fact that this does have a distal taper, even if a minor one, and that one doesn't, you would still be able to feel a difference. But also just looking at them, this is just a better representation of a sword. And it comes down to even just minor things like the fact that this one has the same decorations as the original. I mean, there were less decorated versions, but most of the originals that I see have some sort of decorative touches or something that kind of stands out in the shape.
Like this shamshir, for example, it's unadorned, but you can see that the shape of the guard is more complex. It's not simply flat.
Rather than just tapering fairly simply like this, there would be like little discs at the end or knobs or grooves or something. The LK Chin Shamshir also has these ornamental brass strips. I don't know if the original had these. It's not obvious in the picture, but either way, it just adds a little something. You can just tell that more work went into assembling this and finishing it than the other one. So yeah, you do get what you pay for. To an extent, I should point out that there has been a bit of a trend to artificially ramp up the price to give you the impression of higher quality. I've definitely seen cheaply made questionable swords or even sword-like objects offered at horrendous prices that just give you the idea that, oh, this is something really well made because it costs more and you get what you pay for, right? Well, not always. Anyway, as said, there will be a full review of the LK shamshir. For now, I just want to talk about the difference between these two, which I find rather striking, or should I say, slashing. Hope you found it interesting. Thanks for watching. Check out my other videos as well, and take care, folks.